Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Satisfied Watch Collector podcast. Today, we are going to be talking all about Grand Seiko watches right around the $5,000 price point. Now, I love Grand Seiko. I have one in the collection. I've had others before, and I do think that they are some of the best value out there in the luxury watch space, not only because of the design elements that you get with Grand Seiko, but also the finishing and polishing, some of the dial textures, as well as really the technology that they've developed with spring drive. So today what we're going to do is we're going to actually go through several watches that I've picked out that fall right within that $5,000 price point, or right around, somewhere between 4 to 6. So as long as you've got a budget around $5,000, this video is for you, because I'm going to go through some of the ones that I personally think are great value and best design. So let's just jump right in with our first one, which is the SBGA407. And so this one is going to be one of the bracelet models from the Heritage Collection. And this one is the Soko Special Edition. Now, I looked at the pricing for this one. It's right around $5,000. Kind of right around that price point, so you're right on the money with this one. Now, this watch is steel. It's 39 millimeters in case diameter. The lug to lug is about 47, so fairly wearable even on a small wrist, which is true of most Grand Seikos, honestly. This one does use their spring drive technology. So again, spring drive, if you're not familiar with it, essentially takes the best of both worlds. It takes the best of the mechanical world and the best of the quartz world and kind of meshes them together with a quartz oscillator and a governing wheel which runs in one direction, providing that really smooth sweep of the seconds hand versus having the tick-tock of most automatic watches. So, and we'll see that on several of these models. So again, SBGA 427, you're getting, with spring drive, 15 seconds a month variation. So it's very, very accurate compared to most mechanical watches. Of course, they're continuing to push that with the UFA models. But generally in my collection, my Grand Seiko spring drive is almost always the most accurate one. So you're also getting 100 meters water resistant with this watch. And it does have the front side power reserve, as they do on quite a few models. Now, some people don't mind the dial side power reserve. I am personally much more of a fan of putting it on the back of the watch, so that's what I would prefer, but I don't think it ruins the design. I mean, I do think it's intentional. They do it in a very tasteful way on most of their watches, so I don't think it's a deal breaker for me. Personally, I just like the backside dial or power reserve. So now the texture on this watch is very interesting. It's almost like a vertical brushed texture, and it's made to imitate essentially a bamboo forest at the end of autumn. So that's what this dial is made to look like. And with that, they added a couple neat little accents. So they've got this kind of like a mid to light, like almost a medium green color, kind of like a spring green type of color that they've used for both the seconds hand on the power reserve indicator, and the spring drive text at the bottom of the watch is also in that same nice green color. So again, really kind of an interesting piece. Is a special edition watch, but you can find them. They're pretty available out there, and like I say, they are right around that price point at about $5K. So let's move on to our next one, which, if you know Grand Seiko at all, you've got to know this model, should be on the list, and that is the SBGA211, again from the Heritage Collection. This is the classic Snowflake dial. Now, the Snowflake kind of became one of the phenomenon watches at Grand Seiko. I think, as the White Birch kind of did in the Evolution 9 collection. But this really kind of, I think, stole the show in the Heritage Collection and kind of helped popularize the brand. This is another example of a watch that you can get right below $5K, honestly. Like, this is probably of all the watches on the list, might be the overall best value, just because of the next thing that I'll mention, which is the case material. this is made of their high-intensity titanium. So as opposed to, you know, some of the steel models that they do have, which, again, nothing wrong with steel, but when you have the opportunity to get a titanium watch, that just gives you more durability, more wearing, like, you know, use cases for it, and that's pretty fantastic. The only difference here is it is a little bit larger. It's a 41 millimeter case and about a 49 millimeter lug-to-lug dimension. So, you know, it will wear a little bit larger than the Soko Special Edition that we started with. But you'll see the watches we go through, they do vary in size a little bit, you know, along different axes of wearability. So again, great watch here. We've got the same spring drive movement in the Soko Special Edition. So 15-second deviation per month, 100 meters of water resistant. Still has the front side power reserve. I do think it's a little more subtle here just because of the fact that the dial is white. There's no like accent on the power reserve, so it does kind of blend in a bit more. But the texture on this watch is just spectacular. And as you would imagine, in a dial or a watch called the Snowflake, the dial is made to look exactly like snow. That we'll talk about kind of the nature-inspired dials that you know, Grand Seiko uses, and this is a perfect example of it. So it's just like fresh snow falling on the ground, you know, during winter, and just that natural kind of texture that you would get in looking at freshly fallen snow, and it's spectacular. And then when you've got the blued seconds hand on it as well, so it's not a colored blue, but it's actually fired, meaning that they heat the actual seconds hand until it oxidizes and starts to change color and becomes blue. So a blue fired seconds hand also as a neat little accent on the watch. It's pretty sweet. So if you like white dial watches, again, it's a little bit of a larger, on the larger side here for Grand Seiko, but if you like white dial watches, the Snowflake is probably the best value on this list because you're getting not only the high intensity titanium, which will be more scratch resistant, but you're also getting the spring drive technology as well. And like I say, I saw these for under 5K, which is an amazing value for a watch that will literally last you a lifetime. So if you're going with one watch, that could be it. Now, that being said, we're going to move on to our next watch, which is probably my personal favorite on this list. And because of one of the reasons is because it has a blue dial, and you know I love blue dials if you've watched any of my content. So let's talk about the SBGA375, and I've talked about this one before. So this is another bracelet clad model from the Heritage Collection from Grand Seiko, and this one again, really good value. This one I was able to find even under 4K. So yes, you don't get the titanium like you did on the Snowflake, but still being a steel model with a amazing blue dial, it's such a great deal. So this one also has the spring drive technology, like I mentioned, so you're still getting 15 seconds a month in terms of accuracy. It's a 40 millimeter case size and about 46 millimeters lug to lug. So this one's a little more wearable than the Snowflake. So that does, you know, that's a point in the direction of the 375 here. 100 meters of water resistance, as with many of these, not all of them, but many of them. And it does have, again, the front dial, or the dial side power reserve. Again, I think this one is a little more subtle. It's a little more subtle. And the thing that I like the most about this watch is the contrast to me of like a dark navy blue with the high polish that Grand Seiko uses on their hour markers, cases, hands, you know, like all those things, just looks so spectacular. Like when you see one and you get it under some different light where you can move it around, SBGA 375 is probably, from a design standpoint, my personal favorite on this list. So it gets extra points just because it's, you know, blue dial and it's spectacular. So I think from a design perspective, I would go with SBGA 375. From a value perspective, I do think the Snowflake probably still wins by a little bit. All right, let's move on to our next one. Now we're talking about a different blue dial, the SBGR 321. Now this one is, Grand Seiko does many anniversary or limited edition models, so this one is a 60th anniversary model from Grand Seiko, also in the Heritage Collection. And again, you'll see most of those based on the price point we're talking about, because if you start to get into the Evolution 9 stuff at all, typically you're going to see those living at a higher price point, somewhere in the 7 to 8,000 range to start, all the way up to 10, 11, 12. So yes, 60th anniversary. This one has a lighter blue dial than the SBGA 375, so you're getting a different variant of blue here. And this one was a 2,500 piece limited edition, which you can get for right around $4,000. So again, very good value. All of these watches are going to be great value, but this one is another really good one. This one is also steel, 40 millimeter case size with about a 46.5 millimeter lug to lug. So again, very wearable, works well on most wrists, even if they're relatively small. You've got in this one, this is our first one on the list where you have the 9S65 movement, which is an automatic movement. So just kind of like your standard watch movement, moves at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour. So not quite the spring drive technology that you're getting in some of those first few that we mentioned, but still a beautiful watch, no doubt. And with this one, on the timing, you're talking about +5, -3 seconds a day. So you're kind of close to that COSC certification. You're kind of right in that realm. It's a little outside technically, but again, they're great watches. You're not going to have too much issue with that sort of a tolerance. Also has 100 meters water resistance due to the screw down crown. And then this one, you also have some limited edition features on the case back itself, which are, kind of nice. And this dial is made to imitate more of the blue sky above Mount Iwate. So we'll hear a little bit more in some of these other models around the different studios and some of the nature and things like that. So Mount Iwate is a mountain, just like the name would indicate, outside of the Shizukuishi studio in Japan, where they make some of their watches. So basically, this dial is meant to imitate or mimic that light, like morning sky kind of coming through. Now, there's a little detail on here that you can see if you're looking at the picture, but I haven't talked about it yet, and that is that there's a tiny little red accent at the very tip of the seconds hand. And there's also some caseback accents as well. And this is to kind of imitate what the sun looks like when it comes through into the studio in the morning. So you get the morning blue sky, you get a little bit of sunlight coming through into the studio, and then you've got this really nice combination of blue with tiny little red accents. And I don't think the red is too much. There are some watches, dials, where I think they add a lot more red, but I think with this it's very tasteful, it's very subtle, and again, if you're a blue dial fan like I am, you won't really be too thrown off by how they do this one. I think it was very, very well done for them. So let's move on to our next watch, which is going to be the SBGA407. Now, this is our first watch that we're talking about from the Elegance collection, so typically a little more on the dressy side of things. And this is one of my personal favorite dials, just in general. This is the Skyflake watch, which is has the Skyflake textured dial, which they have done on some other ones, including the watch that I do own, which is the SBGA. Oh man, I'm blanking on the reference now. It'll come to me. But it's a limited edition that they did only in Japan that has the Skyflake dial on it, but it's in an Evolution 9 case. So you do get the backside power reserve. The front of the dial is very clean, and I really, really like the watch that I own, obviously, which is why I have it. I'll get the reference. I don't know why I'm blanking on it right now, but anyways. So yeah, SBGA 407. This one slightly under or right around 5K on this one, and again, a little bit more of a dressy style. So it is steel, still 40 millimeters lug to lug, 40 millimeter case diameter, 48.5 lug to lug. So again, a little bit larger. It's going to maybe wear a little bit bigger than some of these prior models that we mentioned. It does again have the 9R65 spring drive movement, which has a 72-hour power reserve. Plenty of power reserve in these. I mean, I don't know if you need more than 3 days really, but obviously they've kind of pushed the envelope with some. Now they have their spring drive 5-day movements as well. So again, an accuracy or deviation of 15 seconds a month on that movement. And then in this one, you're also getting 100 meters of water resistance just because it is still a screw down crown. So even though it's a dressier watch, you still get a screw down crown, still gives you that nice water resistance. So this would be a great candidate for like, you know, a rubber strap, something like that you could put on. Rubber B makes some excellent rubber straps that look like they're leather. So they kind of have a faux leather look to them, but they still look pretty good. And you could, you know, again, take this in the water, take it for, you know, in a shallow pool or something like that, and you would have no problem doing that with this watch. It does have the front side power reserve, and then this light blue snowy texture. I just think they nailed it. You know, again, they did really well on the Snowflake. Has that perfect like fresh winter look to it. And basically, the Skyflake came from the idea being, if I'm looking at, you know, the mountains, again, in some of these studios, it's the Hotaka Mountains, and there was a snowfall and it's a blue sky, what I probably would see is not completely white. I might see some of that blue reflected in the snow. So once again, you have this beautiful textured design and this really, really nice light blue tone to the dial that just looks spectacular with a, you know, again, blued seconds hand is just a nice detail on here. So really, really like this one. I think from the dial perspective of like the dials that Grand Seiko is known for, I would say this is probably my favorite overall dial that they are known for is the Skyflake. It's so flawless and I really like it, especially when you take the power reserve and move it to the back. So that's the SBGA407 or the Skyflake. Now, let's keep moving here. We've got a few more to go. Next one is the SBGR325. Now, this is another one. We're back to the Heritage Collection here. And this one is another 25th anniversary, 1,200 piece limited edition model. So, you know, again, going back to how they do like to do some anniversary models, some limited editions. And most of them, when you see these limited edition models, they're not like, you know, 10 or 50 or something like that. Usually they're a couple hundred. In the case of the few that we've talked about so far, they're like over 1,000 or 2,000, you know. So Grand Seiko, they don't try to create too much exclusivity in their normal catalog, although they do have exclusivity in some ways with some of their pieces, especially when you get into like, you know, some of the Crador micro artist studio models and things like that, and some other limited editions. So this one has kind of like an icy blue dial, which is kind of neat. Again, right around $4 to $5 grand is kind of what I found this one priced at. Now, this one is steel again. However, the difference here with the 325 is that you're looking at a 37 millimeter case. Now, I have small wrists. My wrists are about 6 inches in circumference, and some of my best worn watches are right around this lug-to-lug dimension of this watch, which is 45 millimeters. So it's very wearable. This would be a great unisex option. Ladies could wear this, men could wear this, and it's going to look great either way. It's probably going to fit you a little bit better than some of those other ones if you have small wrists like I do. So this one also has the 9S65 automatic movement. So again, not spring drive, but you're getting a standard automatic movement in this one. So you'll have that deviation of, again, +5, -3 seconds a day. It does have a screw down crown. So again, you're going to get 100 meters of water resistance. And the dial here, we're going back to Mount Iwate. You're going to hear this a couple times in the podcast episode today. This one is made to evoke the clear sky above Mount Iwate. So I love Grand Seiko because they're trying to kind of capture all these different elements of nature around their studios. So, you know, with some, again, they're looking at what would the ground look like with freshly fallen snow or snow under a blue sky. Now we're kind of taking the camera and looking upward and, you know, looking at the sky above Mount Iwate, again, at the Shizukuishi studio. The other little neat detail that this one has is it's got a colored gold Grand Seiko logo on the dial. along with a blue fired seconds hand. So you got a couple neat little accents on the dial there. I do think gold, by the way, they've done that on several of their models in various instances, and I do think the gold GS logo actually looks really good. Like, it's, again, subtle but tasteful and still adds a little pop of color that may otherwise not be on the dial. So I do really, really like that. And then another kind of interesting feature with this one is going to be the rotor. So on the back side of the watch, most of them have a more traditional looking rotor that we've talked about so far. There's nothing really special to see on majority of them. This one has a titanium rotor that has more of this kind of fanning, like fan kind of look to it. And it's a blue oxidized titanium, which is really neat looking. So definitely take a look at some pictures of the back of the SBGR325, because the rotor does look really cool on this one. I actually like that they, again, with an anniversary watch, they've kind of done something special to commemorate that, and it's not just the same old rotor on the back of the watch. All right, let's move on here. We've got 4 more to go. So next watch that we're going to talk about, I also really, really like, because it's actually kind of close to the Skyflake, but of course Grand Seiko has found a way to make it different. Now this one is going to be the SBGY007, the Omiwatari. This is a really beautiful watch. I love the look of this one. This one is from the Elegance collection, again, so it's going to be a little bit more of a dress style watch. And I did find this one just over $5,000. So this is going to be a little bit more on the higher end of the price point we're talking about, along with these next couple here. But still a great watch, and not too far out of reach if you're looking to spend about $5,000 on a great watch. So this one is steel, once again. It is 38.5 millimeters. So again, a smaller, more wearable case. We're looking at 44 lug to lug. So I do think this would also make a great unisex option here. Very, very nice like fit. And the other thing with this one is it's a manual spring drive. So before we had automatic spring drives, which are great, this one has the 9R31 manual spring drive, which gives you 72 hours of power reserve, once again, 15 seconds a month deviation, and you get a lot thinner case. So with this one, you're talking about just a hair over 10 millimeters thick, which, my Jaeger LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Perpetual is just right about the same size. So if you like a thinner watch, I didn't talk as much about the thickness, but, again, most of these are going to be right in the 13 millimeter, 12, 13, 14 maybe. As far as the case thickness, this one would be a great choice if you prefer a thinner, maybe a little more subtle, not as hefty watch. So I do really like the Omiwatari for all those reasons. And then we, of course, have to talk about the dial texture on this one, because we already said we've got, a watch that looks like the snow with a blue sky, bright kind of day. We already talked about that with the Skyflake, so what the heck is the Omiwatari? Well, this one is the ice of Lake Suwa. So again, Lake Suwa being one of the bodies of water outside of one of their studios in Shinshu. And so you'll hear, you've probably seen, if you've looked at any Grand Seiko, they have the Lake Suwa models now. They have several of them. I can't remember the references exactly off the top of my head. At the beginning, there's an 019, there's an 021. So there's a couple of them that they've released. There was a special edition 007, I think. So there's a few Lake Suwa models that are made to showcase the water itself. So this style is kind of a different variant of that, which is the ice that shows up on Lake Suwa frozen during winter and what it would look like. So you still have this really nice light blue color and kind of this natural looking icy texture to it. For as much as I don't like winter, I do love a lot of these dial textures that look like winter because it just looks so beautiful. So this definitely has a more refined look and feel to the case than some of the other ones that look a little more bulky and sporty. But again, it just depends on what you like. If you're looking for something thinner, this would definitely be a great option for you. Okay, let's keep moving. SBGA 429. So this one is another special edition. This is the Soko Shadow, and this actually is kind of similar to the first one that we talked about, the Soko Special Edition, which was white on the dial. This one has more of a like brushed kind of steel look or a gray to it, so a very different color than the original one that we talked about, but it does still have that same kind of vertical brushing pattern, which I do think looks really nice. Now this one I was able to find for between $5 and $6 grand, so again a little bit more on the higher end of the $5,000 price point, but still within that $5,000 range pretty comfortably. So let's talk about this one. Steel, again, 39 millimeters here on the case, so a 47 lug to lug. So, you know, again, we're kind of right in the middle. You know, we had a couple that were a little bit on the narrower lug to lug end. We had a couple that were on the higher end. So this is kind of right in the middle. Again, a great option for even a smaller wrist. This will still work well for you. We're back to having the 9R65 spring drive in here. So this is the automatic winding spring drive, 72-hour power reserve, 15 seconds deviation a month, and 100 meters water resistant because we are back to having the screw down crown onto that one. So very similar again to the original watch that we talked about with the Soko Special Edition in terms of the look. So like I say, that vertical brushing is going to be very similar to that. Steel gray dial. The neat part of this one is you have these really light green accents. So it's almost like a lime green, maybe not quite as bright as a lime green. It's a little more subtle on both the seconds hand and on the power reserve indicator, which again is on the front side of the dial. And you also get that neat pop of color with the gold GS logo once again. So, you know, they kind of say like these dials were inspired by the end of autumn when the first frost embraces the forest is kind of how they talk about it. So you still have these little touches of color in nature during that time, and that's why you have, you know, these kind of subtle accents that they still add to the watches. And again, like those are the types of things that I like about Grand Seiko. It's like, you know, they're not just trying to make everything all one color. They're not just trying to, you know, they're not putting like some sort of a leaf texture or something like that right on the dial, but it's like they're capturing the colors, the textures, they're blending them and melding them together really well to make it more interesting. And that's one of the reasons that I think Grand Seiko has some of the most beautiful looking watches, is because they find ways to do that more so than most other brands. So I think that's awesome. All right, let's move on. We've got two more to go here. Next one is the SBGY007 Now, we have not had an additional complication yet on anything in the show, but I do think that this one is just awesome. I gotta say, like, this is one of the first Grand Seikos that I saw from the brand, you know, as I was kind of like looking at different watches and things like that. And this was the watch that actually made me want a Grand Seiko. You know, I had seen pictures and videos and all those things. This was the watch that I credit for kind of being like my gateway into Grand Seiko, because I was like, man, that is a really cool looking blue dial. Color, texture, we'll talk about that in a second. So this one is again from the Heritage Collection. It is the blue Iwate GMT, and this one was a boutique exclusive. It's a little bit older now. I believe they've got a replacement for it in the catalog. I can't remember the reference for it. I want to say it's somewhere in the sixes, maybe 635, something like that. I'm not sure. But so they do have a replacement for it now in the catalog that they've kind of like updated, made a couple subtle changes, but for the most part kept to the original watch. And they will do that. You know, again, I mentioned Lake Sua before. They originally released the special edition, which was the 007, and then they changed it to titanium in the 019, and then they changed it back to steel, and changed, you know, and they changed the dial a little bit on each one, and, you know, some of the accents. So it's interesting how Grand Seiko will continue to do that, but that's also why I like, you know, that there's always something fresh in the catalog. So this watch, the SBGJ235, Was able to find these right in the $5,000 to $6,000 price point range. Now, again, this one, you're getting a little more value here because you're also, in addition to getting, your date and all those things, you're getting a GMT function. So this watch has a, I don't know what you'd call it, almost like a peach colored, maybe like a really, really light orange GMT hand on the dial. And it also has a GMT in like text on the dial too, which is kind of neat. So you get a couple of little pops of, like I say, almost like a light fiery orange kind of color, which is a neat contrast with the dark blue of the dial. So this one is steel, 40 millimeters in case design or in case size. It is 46 millimeters lug to lug. So again, it will wear pretty well on most wrists. I will say with this one, it is thicker. We talked about the Omiwatari being on the thinner side, around 10 millimeters. This one is on the thicker side. This one is like 14 millimeters thick. So just be ready if you go with any of the GMT watches, as you would expect, as you add more complications to a watch. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of an addition to the thickness of it. And, again, personally, I don't mind it. I've got a Sky Dweller. I've got a Plo Prof. So, like, for me, I'm in the thick watch club because I've got some of those. But if you like thinner watches, this may not be the watch for you. So just be aware of that as you're kind of looking at this one. The movement in here is going to be the 9S86. So this is actually a high beat automatic. So this one's going to run at 5 hertz or 36,000 vibrations per hour. So again, just you're going to have a smoother sweep of the seconds hand because it's running at a higher frequency. Not going to be as clean and smooth and silky as the spring drive will, but it's essentially a higher frequency, a faster frequency than the standard kind of automatics that they make. So timing deviation on this one, back to that +5, -3 seconds a day. 100 meters water resistant, which again, 100 meters water resistant on a GMT watch, that has a 55-hour power reserve. Pretty good. The power reserve, you can tell that this is an older watch before they started to, kind of refine some of the movement architecture and like the, barrels and things, because it does have a shorter power reserve than most of the others on this list. But again, that's okay. You still get a good, 2.5 days out of it basically. So you should be okay. Let's see. And then the dial. We've got to talk about the dial. So this dial, I didn't really understand why when I first saw it, but this is just called the Mount Iwate dial. So I was like, I don't understand why that's what that is, but basically it comes from the texture of the mountain, like of what it looks like, and it almost has a hammered type of look to it. When you get really up close on this, it looks kind of crazy almost, but from a little bit of a distance or looking at pictures, it almost has a look of like kind of a concentric, like radial hammering to it is kind of how it looks. So it's kind of like coming out from the cannon pinion at the center and making its way out to the edges of the dial. So it does have a really interesting look. I love seeing this one, up close with that texture because it is really, really cool. So again, inspired by the Mount Iwate from Shizukuishi, that studio. And like I say, it has that light orange GMT hand that gives some nice contrast on the dial. So really, really cool watch. Only GMT that I mentioned on the list. A lot of these are going to be, more expensive when you get into the GMTs. So I thought it would be nice to have one of those in there just to give you some more options for, what you may want. So that's that watch that got me into Grand Seiko. Now let's finish up here with, I tried to find something just very like quintessential in terms of not so much Grand Seiko, but just watches in general. And I think that whether, again, you're like getting your first watch ready to go and you're just kind of shopping around and you've got $5,000 and you're like, I'm looking for a first watch, that's about what I want to spend, or you've got a whole bunch of watches already, you cannot go wrong with this next pick, which is the SBGA203. So this is another bracelet watch from the Heritage Collection, and this one is just, it's just clean. Like I picked it because it's just really clean. Black matte dial, under $4,000. So again, if you're looking for something of value here, this is a great great value. It is steel. It is a little bit larger at 41 millimeters in case size, which leads to a 49 millimeter lug to lug. So it is a little bit larger than some of the others. Again, if you have a smaller wrist here, you may want to go with something like the 375 with the blue dial, or if you have, again, like a real small wrist, the SBGR325 with that anniversary edition. But back to this one. So spring drive in here, it's just so hard to beat. Like it's so hard to beat with the accuracy that you're getting in a watch for less than $4,000. You're not going to find any other watch for $4,000 that's going to get you a deviation of 15 seconds or less a month. It's insane when you think about it. So 100 meters water resistant, so you're no worries there. Does have the front side power reserve. I do think of all the power reserves that are on the front side that we talked about today, this is the most subtle because the dial is just black and the power reserve is black. So all you really see is there's a little bit of a texture to it. And then there's, of course, the silver like power reserve indicator that moves. But overall, like the front of the dial, you almost wouldn't know that the power reserve is there. Like it's that subtle. In pictures, obviously, when you're looking at it up close, you're going to see it. But this one does just look super simple and super clean. And like I say, I do think, like, if you're looking for a one-and-done watch, I would argue this could be it, because you're going to spend, like I say, less than $4,000. You're going to get a beautifully contrasting dial with the polishing of, again, the hands, the indices, some of the surfaces on the case. And I do think, like I mentioned with the SBGA 375, the contrast is just so spectacular on these watches. And this is a great example of it. So, like, if you're looking for just a no-nonsense, you're not like me, you don't necessarily want any colors, you're just like, I want a great watch that I can wear dress down, dress up, I can wear casual, I can go to the pool, I can, like, all of those things, this watch is probably going to be it. So, those are my picks for the best Grand Seiko models under $5,000 or around $5,000. I do think, again, that buying these new is very realistic. I mean, the prices are going to be a little bit higher than what I mentioned in the prices that I gave, but this is a brand where I would say they're very reasonable. So I think if you have an authorized dealer, and you have access to that nearby, buying them new is a good bet. You also get into the GS9 Club, which then gets you access to kind of their newsletter. So you'll get some, news, obviously, from the brand. You'll hear about, special edition and new releases coming, typically before they're released. You may get, like, access to cool interviews or videos or things like that. They do post a lot of those. So there are some benefits with Grand Seiko to buying it from an authorized dealer. With some brands, honestly, like, there's not much point to buying it from a dealer. There's just not. Again, pricing could be a reason, but I'm just saying there's no other real perks to buying the watch from the dealer. Grand Seiko is one where I would say it's worth buying one from a dealer, just so you can get into the GS9 Club. I got the opportunity to attend one of the events that they promoted, because they promote, whenever they're having events in there. And, I got to visit a local authorized dealer and got to meet Joe Kirk and see him speak and see a whole bunch of really cool watches. So there's definitely some benefits to the GS9 Club. I would highly recommend, getting at least one from a boutique, to get into the GS9. And then after that, whatever you want. But those are my picks. So I would be curious, which one on this list would you pick as, like, your top of any of these watches that are right around $5,000? Now, truth be told, there's a lot of others. These are not the only ones you can find around this price point. You can certainly find watches that are less than this. If you go just straight quartz, you can find some amazing Grand Seiko models for $2,000-3,000. So I wanted to focus more specifically on mechanical watches, still truly mechanical in that price range, and not look at the quartz catalog, because that would be a whole nother video, or several probably, because they do also have a lot of really, really beautiful quartz watches as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. Again, my name is James. My goal for you is to know and love your watches. So thanks for joining me. And until next time, please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts down below on which watch you would pick. And I will talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.